Hello everyone and welcome to another Wavelength series. My name is Waveney. I am your leadership mindset coach and I help managers master their mindset, their communication and their influence. Now, are you ready to get on the same wavelength? Fabulous. So wouldn't it be great if you could actually voice your concerns at work without fearing retaliation, without having that knot in your stomach? Wouldn't that be great? Or imagine this. You are invited to a meeting with your boss. Other people are there, your peers, whomever, and your boss shares this idea. And imagine being able to speak up and share, well, actually, I have another way to enhance that idea. Or imagine being able to say, my perspective is a little bit different. Imagine being able to do this. Or wouldn't it be great if you could voice that unpopular opinion or feedback and you don't feel like you'd be labeled as difficult or challenging or people are looking at you funny? Wouldn't all that be great? Yes, it would, wouldn't it? And so for many people, this is a fantasy. Going to work, being able to express themselves, especially if they have a different opinion or even speaking up. And in particular, in the Caribbean, where questioning authority is a thing. It is seen as a very negative and very bad thing. For some, this is just airy-fairy, pure fantasy. So what I know from my 19 years of being in human resources and almost 21 years being in hospitality, that if people don't feel a sense of psychological safety, then all you are doing is managing a group of people who don't want to get in trouble. That's all you're doing. You're managing a group of people who don't want to get in trouble. And so today we're speaking about psychological safety. And I wanted to build off of the content that I did last week where we spoke about age and the difference in age. And I mentioned a few things there where older persons may challenge the younger manager and the younger manager may be feeling some type of, discomfort because one, they're new and, we have this challenge between these two groups. So if you haven't seen that video, please go and please look at that podcast. It's a really, really good podcast. And I'm also happy to share, for those of you who viewed it, the person who actually prompted that idea for the content, he reached out to me and thanked me, and he really loved that love the information from that perspective. And so if you haven't seen it, go and see it. But today we're speaking about psychological safety, where questioning authority is seen as some sort of disrespect, where speaking up has become dangerous, and where silence is a strategy of survival in the workplace. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but I certainly have experienced that. I'll share with you in a few minutes my story around that. But in the Caribbean, it looks like this, right? Sometimes you hear people saying, "Me ain't got nothing to say." That's our local dialect. And what you're really saying is, I don't have anything to say. So when people say that, you really need to pay attention. Or you might hear people saying, let me just put my head down and do the work. So you might ask someone, how is it going at work? And they say, they're saying to you, listen, I'm just putting my head down and doing the work, right? That's an indication as well. For those of you who don't work in the environment, or even if you do, these are indications that the work environment there's something off there. The other way you can tell something is wrong, besides the obvious, and I'll get into the obvious in a few, is that awkward silence. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience where a senior leader or someone in authority that has a position, they share an idea or some sort of direction, and there's an awkward silence. Nobody says, oh, that's a great idea. Nobody jumps up to ask a question. There is just awkward silence, right? And the person or someone else usually says, does everybody understand? Are we in agreement? They're prompting some sort of response. But initially, there is no response. There's just this awkward silence. Those are indications that the environment is not psychologically safe. And so what is this psychological safety? So I stumbled upon this a few years ago, but the lady behind this, her name is Amy Edmondson, and you can do some Google research. She's a Harvard professor, and she is the one that really pioneered the term psychological safety. And what it is this belief that that people at work, right? This belief that you won't be punished or humiliated if you speak up, if you share your idea, if you make a mistake, making a mistake, or if you ask a question or if you raise a concern, that you're not going to be humiliated, that you're not going to get in trouble, that people feel free at work to do those things, right? And I just want you to think about it for a minute, because many of our workplaces are not like that, or many of the leaders that we work for, they're not like that. And maybe you are leading a team and you're reflecting, and I'd love to invite you to reflect on the last time somebody made a mistake, or the last time somebody tried to speak up, what happens. I've seen it so much, and I'm going off script right now. I've seen it so much though in workplaces, and I've never really quite understood this, where you have someone in a team and they are a little bit bold, they're a little bit, let's say, mouthy, they're the ones who would speak up, and there's nothing wrong with that, because people are not in school, right? As a matter of fact, if you are a leader and there's someone on your team and they have these characteristics, like they are the ones who would tell you, I don't agree, or this is happening, and so forth, encourage it. Because I will tell you, the higher up you climb in your career, the more you are positioned, people are not going to tell you the truth. Many people are afraid to tell you the truth for this very reason, that it's not psychologically safe. They may have worked in work environments where speaking up came with a consequence, where disagreeing with your boss came with a consequence. And I love working for people at my 9 to 5 that the best leaders I've had are those that I could disagree and say I disagree and share my viewpoint, but at the end of the day, they're the leader and we go in that direction, and it's okay. And it's okay, right? And those made for the best leaders that I've had, those made for the best relationships that I've had. Let me go back to Miss Amy Edmondson and this issue of psychological safety. So psychological safety, it's really about taking interpersonal, it's about interpersonal risk taking. Think about a family dynamic or a friend dynamic that you may have. You may have a group of friends or even in your own family, and think about, if you have this, how free you are, how comfortable you are to share and express whatever it is. If you don't agree, if you agree, if you made a mistake, if you there's someone that you can go to, nobody's going to speak down to you, nobody's going to make you feel stupid. Think about if you have any relationships like that where you are comfortable in taking that risk of sharing. And it's interesting they should use the word risk, because it really is a risk. Many of us have been shut down. Have you ever been shut down? Drop an emoji in the comments. Have you ever tried to share something with someone and they shut you down? Could be a parent, could be school, anything. How did you feel? And it is a risk. And so it's a risk. Over the last few episodes, I've spoken a lot about, trauma. I spoke about imposter syndrome. I spoke about burnout. And in those episodes, I spoke about people pleasing. And in those episodes, I give the science behind it. I give the what's happening in your body, in your mind. I give you that insight, right? And I want for you to understand that this is happening, when we have these types of encounters. And if someone has been in a situation or has been in a work environment where they're constantly shut down, then that's a huge issue. That person is not psychologically safe, okay? And they can't disagree openly. So it's really about creating a culture, a work environment where people could trust their voice, where people know that they could share and share respectfully, of course. People know that they are going to be heard, that their voice matters, that they can make a mistake, right? And no one is going to kill them, that they can ask for help. They can ask for help and feel safe about asking for help. That people can raise their hands, as something as simple as raising their hands and saying that I don't understand. I've had this experience many times. You are in a meeting, you don't understand, but everybody is afraid until that one brave person asks the question that everybody else wanted to ask, right? And the person who is responding is like, okay, yes, that's great. That's a great question. And I want you to think about, if you've been in that situation, that sense of relief that you had when someone asked that question. And I also want to invite you to think about, well, why didn't you ask that question? What was it? Why didn't you feel brave enough or safe enough to ask that question? It's the same thing. Psychologically, you don't feel like you're psychologically safe. And so before I get into how a little bit more about how we create the opposite of psychological safety, I want to read for you a few statistics, right? So why it matters. And psychological safety isn't just about, oh shoot, I think I'm all the way up in the camera, but anyway. Psychological safety isn't just about being nice. It has nothing to do with nice. But people do their best work when they feel themselves, when they are comfortable, when they feel safe. When they feel safe. So, number one, Gallup research shows that there are only 3 out of 10 employees that strongly agree that their opinions count at work. Only 3 in 10 people feel like their opinions actually matters. And when that number rises to 6 in 10, organizations see a 27% in reduction in turnover, and turnover is just a fancy word of saying people don't leave. There's a 27% decrease in that, right? There's a 40% reduction in safety incidents. So think about it. If people are in work environments that they don't feel safe to ask questions, to disagree, to say, I don't understand, right? Things are bound to happen. This is all this data is saying, okay? And when it's 6 out of 10, there's also a 12% increase in productivity. So your productivity increases. So when people feel heard and seen, everything improves. It's the best formula. So let me read another one. There is one, I'll read one more. Google's Project Aristotle studied 180 teams and found that psychological safety was the #1 predictor of team effectiveness, more important than who was on the team or even how talented they were, right? High-performing teams weren't the ones with the smartest people. They were the ones where people felt safe to take risks and be vulnerable. And if you think about that, the best teams, because if you're in a team and if you're working on a project and somebody feels safe enough to say, I disagree with that, I think we should do it this way, here's the reason why. If somebody says, I don't understand what you just said, could you break it down to me like a 6-year-old? If everybody, communication is free flowing, there's no fear of reprisal, there is no fear of retaliation, there's no fear of any bad thing, then of course productivity is going to increase. And so it seems very obvious that psychological safety is the way to go. However, it doesn't always happen. So let me share, before I share with you how managers promote the opposite of that, let me just share with you a story. I know all too well how psychological safety, what it means. You know, a few years ago, I encountered, like I mentioned previously, I came across the concept, but then I had the experience where I felt unsafe at work. And I will tell you what caused it was me not disagreeing, but sharing an unpopular feedback or giving up an unpopular perspective. Excuse me. And the reason I say unpopular, it was because the person who was my boss at the time didn't like it. It was different from what he expected me to say. He was the type of person you had to agree with him. I learned that the hard way. You had to agree with him or else. If you weren't like a yes person, like you couldn't have an opinion. And so my biggest mistake was that I disagreed. Eventually I took his instruction, which was fine. But as an employee, I operate on the premise where, you know, I will share my concerns, I will tell you the unpopular truth, I will tell you that, and you as the person who is in charge of me, you can decide what you want to do, and I will go with that, right? But that person wasn't like my previous bosses, and I learned that all too late. And What happened after was just attack after attack on my character, on my reputation. Person tried to get me fired. It was just a lot. And one of these days, I am going to be able to share that story with you in full. But it was a lot. So I know, I know firsthand what feeling unsafe at work is like. And I will tell you, if you ever look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first tier under pyramid is about safety, is about secureness, like your home, like a shelter. And what happens when people don't feel safe at work? It directly impacts that tier. It impacts their sense of safety, because your job is really tied to you. You having a job is tied to you earning money. Money is tied to you being able to pay your bills, to feed your children, to send them to school, for you to do whatever you want to do. And when you don't feel safe at work, it threatens that. It not only stifles your productivity, it not only, in some cases, some people get humiliated. In my case, I was like in a battle, so to speak, and an uncomfortable situation. It's not only that, then it's your mental health, but that environment is threatening the very foundation of your safety. And I want you to understand, it's a very real threat, and it's a very real thing. It's a very real thing. And so, as I speak about how managers create the opposite of psychological safety, I want you to think about how you, as a leader, what you have done. If you have done any of those things, or if you're displaying any of those behaviors with your people, with your team, and to change immediately. Okay? And so let's go. So how managers promote the opposite of psychological safety? Here we go. Number one, they punish people for bringing bad news. And it's more like, how could you make such a mistake? So usually it's a mistake or something like that. And you share that you make the mistake, and you're reprimanded for sharing that you made the mistake. And so there's blame, heavy on the blame. There's anger. And so everybody, even though anybody else mightn't be saying anything, you're teaching people to hide their mistakes. And this is why what I read earlier about mistakes decreasing by that percent is 40% or whatever percent it is. That is why, because if people don't feel safe saying, hey, I made a mistake, or I don't understand, then they're going to hide it until they can't hide it no more, or until something blows up. And I think this is why many times in organizations, you may come in as a new manager, or somebody leaves, or something changes in that department or area, and someone goes in and they find all these errors. They might find files stuff somewhere and things shoved other places. And this is the reason why, because they're hiding. It's not necessarily because a person may be incompetent or they're lazy or what have you. It could be that they were also hiding. So don't punish people for making a mistake, okay? The other way you threaten or you undermine psychological safety is that you shoot down ideas. You may be in a meeting or what have you, and someone shares an idea and you decide it's not going to work. We did it last year, it's not going to work. And that is it, right? What you teach people is, I better keep my mouth shut and keep things to myself and keep my ideas to myself, okay? Another way is that you play favorites. You play favorites and have an inner circle. There are only certain people you listen to. There are only certain people, and this happens a lot. There are only certain people who could make mistakes. There are only grace is extended to this group over here, and over here, these people, they don't get that. And I don't want you to come and tell me, well, Waveney, you don't understand. This person is my best employee, and this person over here, they give me a lot of issues. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People should, influential leaders, they lead from a place. I don't even want to call it fairness, but there's a standard, and it doesn't matter. We can't lead with our emotions, because of course we're going to like people who make our work easier. Of course, it's human nature. But as an influential leader, our job is to support, guide, lead, hold people accountable. Because at the end of the day, if that person leaves, that C performer, that D performer, that person who leaves the organization, they should be able to say, you know what, my manager tried. They really tried with me. They were fair with me. I think they gave me too much grace. I mean, I wouldn't even be, that should be the narrative. Okay? So no favorites. Because what you're doing there is you are encouraging isolation. And when you have the lack of psychological safety in a work environment, it also lends and gives way to a toxic work environment. Lack of psychological safety is one indicator of a toxic work environment. As a matter of fact, I don't have data to back that up, but I would say that it is a key indicator, if not the number one indicator. Number 4, silence as a punishment. You don't agree with something, somebody said something to you don't like, and you have this passive aggressiveness, and you're using silence as a punishment. You're giving the person the cold shoulder. Maybe they said something, they disagreed with you in the meeting, or maybe they shared a different perspective. Maybe they spoke up and you just decided you're in your ego, you're in your pettiness, you haven't done the work yourself, and so you come in the next day and you're not really saying anything to them. You said good morning to the office, but you're not saying anything to this particular person. We need to stop these things. Stop it. Okay? Number 5, people are shamed for their mistakes, right? You encourage and promote this perfection. There's no such thing as perfection. There's only progress, okay? So mistakes are shamed, and I'm not sure why, because mistakes are how we learn. Mistakes are how we grow. If we didn't go through anything challenging, if I never went through that manager who I felt threatened by speaking up, that really threatened my psychological safety at work, I would be coming on here and sharing this, but not sharing it from a place that I know exactly what it feels like, right? The tone would be different. As a matter of fact, I think I have a wavelength video that I produced maybe 3 years ago about the same topic. I'm gonna go back to look for it, and I will tell you, if you compare both me talking now and then, there would be a difference. All right? And so you shame people for mistakes. There's criticism, there's public embarrassment, there's comments like, how could you let this happen? And of course, what do people do? They hide. Psychological safety, if you know about it, or maybe you've never heard the term right? But maybe you are leading from a place where you feel like you need to have people on their toes all the time, like you need to be in control, and so you're running this type of operation, and you're leading in this type of way, and I'm telling you, it's going to be counterproductive because it's not about you being soft. Do you know how much strength it takes as a leader to, and how much maturity that is? Of course, I'm here chatting to you, chatting away, and of course my SD card. I really have to get a SD card, right? And now is the time to get it because Black Friday. Anyway, I was saying, do you know how much maturity it takes as a leader to listen to someone say that they disagree with you, and sometimes you don't get it in a nice tone, because sometimes, depending on the group that you're managing, they don't know how to express themselves. Do you know how mature and how much strength it is to not take things personal? So there's nothing soft about people skills. When people label, and I don't even know who came up with the term soft skills, there's nothing soft about soft skills. Nothing. Because it requires a part of you to, I would say, it requires maturity. It requires you to maybe sometimes compartmentalize. It requires you to grow to hell up and get out of your way and to truly listen to what that person has to say. It takes an influential leader. So there is nothing soft about that. All right. And so if you're confusing safety with psychological safety with being nice and that sort of thing, then you're dead wrong. I am telling you today, you're dead wrong, because the only thing that happens is the opposite. You threaten people's sense of safety and you're creating a toxic work environment. Okay. Sometimes I swear this is the most that I speak when I'm on these, when I'm on wavelength, or if I'm doing a live stream. I swear this is the most that I speak. That's how it feels at times. So what can we do? So now that you know what psychological safety is, now that you know the importance of it, know that you know some ways in which persons threaten that credibility or undermine the psychological safety of the work environment, let's talk about ways in which you could start today. This episode drops on Wednesday, so whenever you're looking at it, you can start tomorrow to implement these actions. So the first way is change how you respond to mistakes. When people on your team make mistakes, change how you respond to them. Do not get upset. Do not get angry. Do not humiliate them. Do not outwardly make them feel like they're foolish for making the mistakes. And yes, I understand that some mistakes can be costly. I understand that you're human, but ultimately, when people make mistakes in your area, your first response should be, okay, let's fix this, let's figure it out. And then what you really want to do is, when you're debriefing how it happened, right? You want to talk about, okay, what was the lesson learned? You want to talk in terms of that type of language. Okay, what was the lesson learned? How did it happen? What would you have done differently? That is a favorite question of mine to ask people. Okay, so tell me, what would you have done differently? Most of the time, if people get a do-over, they would do things differently. I've worked with leaders, that one particular leader that always had your back. He always had my back. He always had the back of my peers, the other people on my team. He always had our back. He always supported us. He always big us up. When we had a mistake, when there was an error, he would help us. It would be more like, okay, we are in this together. Let's fix it. Let's figure it out. I want you to be that person for your team. Be that person for your team, because what you're doing is you are creating trust. You are making them feel psychologically safe. You're also showing them what a great leader does. I always remember that leader, and I strive to be and encourage people to be just like that. Have your people's back. There's nothing worse than having a manager, having a leader that you report to and you feel so unsafe. You feel like you have to cover your ass all the time. It is not a good feeling. I've had those as well. That particular boss that I told you about, that's it. People spend more time trying to cover themselves, trying to document and trying to put things aside just in case this comes up, and it really, really, really affects productivity. So number 2 is encourage different views and perspectives. So if you're in a meeting and you're sharing, or if you're in your one-on-one and you are sharing, don't just accept, everybody agreeing with you. Ask questions. What do you think? Let the foundation, let people know it's okay to disagree with you. Encourage people to have different viewpoints, and let them know, be honest. Let them know that it's not about saying yes, because your job will be much harder if you don't have the truth. Encourage them to be honest, right? So you want to do that. And then number 3 is you want to create predictability and trust, and build trust through small acts, right? What do I mean by that? So that when things go wrong, people know what to expect. It's when you have your meetings with them, are you canceling all the time? You come in to work one day in a happy mood, and then in the next day you're not in a good mood, and it's very sporadic? And I'm not saying that life doesn't happen, that things don't happen to you, but if your people don't know what to expect from you, then you are creating unpredictability. And humans don't like unpredictability. You know that. You don't like it. I don't like it. Your team doesn't like it. And so you want to be consistent. You have a meeting with them, you keep that meeting. When mistakes happen, then you want to deal with them the same way. You want to have their back. People must feel that. So when things go wrong, they know what to expect. I'll share with you an incident I made. So when I was an executive assistant, I had a boss and I made a huge error. So he was an American, and he was in the island, and he needed extra pages in his US passport. So I don't know if they still do this, but if you ran out of pages, there's a way they could have put additional pages in your US passport. I don't even know if you could do it in all passports. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So what I did was I needed to go and send off his passport to the US Embassy in Barbados. I went to the business center and I gave his passport to the lady there. So the business center was located in the hotel. We've managed it and everything. So it was an employee. So I gave it to her. I said, okay, this is the address. Wrote on the address on the DHL slip. And actually that time it was FedEx we were using. On the FedEx slip, and I turned off, which was a huge mistake. She then called me sometime after and said, I have something to tell you. She looked very scared. What they had done is someone else had come in and she had mixed up the courier slip. So his passport was supposed to go to Barbados, it was sent to Jamaica, and the other package was sent to Barbados. And so when I tell you that the earth could have swallowed me up right then and there, God could have taken me home. God could have taken me home right then and there. I was so scared. And I had to go and I had to tell him. And he was upset. You could see he was upset. But we were working. I had already called the FedEx manager. He was already working on it. And he was upset and we worked on getting it back. Anyway, it turned out okay. Afterwards, he called me in his office and I swear to God, he probably was going to fire me, right? And he called me in his office and he said, Wave, don't ever leave my things like that. Don't ever do that, right? You stay there and you do it yourself. You always do that. You stay there and you do it yourself. And he extended grace to me in that moment. And when I said he extended grace, because it could have gone the other way. You're probably looking at this and saying, well, if this was my boss or if this was me, he didn't do any of that. He didn't shout, he didn't rant, he didn't rave, he didn't, And it just taught me a very valuable lesson, right? In that moment. But it also taught me that if I made a mistake, that I could go to him, right? That was a bigger lesson, that I could go to him and we would fix it. We would fix it. And I am grateful for that lesson. So I wanted to share that with you because things are going to happen. People on your team are going to do stupid things. They're going to make silly mistakes. They're going to make mistakes that they were not thinking. They're going to make mistakes from maybe things are going on in their lives and they're not thinking about the company, they're thinking about themselves, right? They're going to make mistakes. But how will you deal with that mistake? How will you create that psychological safety? I will tell you, you will win people over more when you create that safety net for them. And so I just wanted to share that example and share with you these 3 ways in which you could actually implement. You could start today or tomorrow and start implementing and then start deciding that you are going to be an influential leader, that you are going to use leadership as a platform and use it to build your legacy. It is possible. Are you going to make mistakes? Yes, you're going to make mistakes because we are human. But the goal is when you hear these messages, for you to implement them, for you to put the tactics and the strategies in your toolbox. So when the opportunity arises, that you could execute, right? And that you could be that leader for your team, that they would feel great speaking up. And you will see when you implement and you create or curate that type of environment with your team, you would recognize how the atmosphere and the energy changes and how free people are, right? All because you decided that you were going to lead differently, that you decided that you were going to be an influential leader. And so if you need additional support, I will put my Calendly link below. Schedule a consultation call. Let's talk about the challenges that you're facing and I'll share with you the support I am offering. I want you to be the best at what you do. I want you to leave a positive legacy and I want you to be that influential leader that people speak positively about and that people remember with fondness. Until next time, I will see you on another wavelength. Bye.